welcome, please, Krista Tippett.
Hello, Detroit. I want to thank Elisa Martina of Detroit Metro Parent and all the sponsors. I loved hearing that list read. And Michael Alcesser, of course, who actually was one of the first people in the entire public radio system who believed that this show should be on public radio and could be on public radio. And I'm incredibly grateful to him. And as those of you who know him may know, he is one of the great thinkers and leaders and actually just all-around great human beings in public radio or anywhere. So we've so been looking forward to coming to Detroit. Also, I want to say Michael is here tonight, I think, as a passionate father. And a full disclosure, I am a journalist, but I'm also not neutral on the subject of parenting. I actually have 2 teenagers. And I also brought with me the end of a cold, which I will wear as a badge of honor in this context because I got it from my children. You know, this is just one of these things that you don't expect about parenting, all the things they will give you, all the viruses you never knew were out there. And you know, when Michael and I first started talking about this, and we knew that Detroit Metro Parent was involved, we were interested in this theme of raising children, which of course just means raising human beings. In a world that I think feels, I suppose the world always feels complicated in any age, but I think there's a pace of change and uncertainty right now that is unsettling, and it's unsettling to be a parent or a grandparent at the best of times. So we started thinking about who I might want to have with me, who I might want to speak with. And, you know, in the beginning, we were thinking about experts on parenting or grandparenting. And then what I realized is I really just wanted somebody who was wise and who also had lived this experience of raising children. And eventually, I slept on this, and my mind eventually came back around to Sylvia Boorstein, who I'd read years ago. I didn't tell you this. In the St. Paul Public Libraries, I stumbled across your book about 10 years ago, I think, when I was first having the idea for this show. Her book, That's Funny You Don't Look Buddhist. Because Sylvia is one of the people who literally brought Buddhism to the West, to the United States in the 1970s, and was Jewish, like a lot of the people who brought Buddhism to the West in the 1970s. A lot of people who we still are sort of household names with Buddhism in the United States. But she's also written over the years about how she has come back to really richly integrate that with her Jewish identity, which was there before she was a Buddhist, and to talk about finding again in Judaism the imagery and poetry and ancestry and continuity that nourish her, and that she's also passed on to her children. So when I thought of Sylvia as this wise person, I started Googling to see if you ever wrote about children and parenting and grandparenting. What I found is that in her bio description, everywhere I could find it, she lists herself this way. She has lots of credentials, but it started out, Sylvia Boorstein is a wife, mother, grandmother, author, teacher, psychotherapist. And I thought, that's it. This is our person.
Actually, I'm happy that you discovered that. I think it's true. I normally describe myself that way. And I find that when people say, what are you proudest of in your whole life? It's clear to me that I am most proud of the fact that my children now, really adults, all of them now, 3 of the 4 of them are in their 50s. And so that's really a substantial credential. Mm-hmm. And they're all very, very nice people. Mm-hmm. And that is my best. That's what I'm proudest of. And my grandchildren are coming along, and they are very good people. And I'm so proud of that. That's the best thing. I don't think I've done it. I certainly haven't done it alone. I've done it with their father, and I've done it with their teachers and with our community. But they are, I think, my most important work in my life.
How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 7.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, one thing that I enjoyed reading in think it was in your book, That's Funny You Don't Look Buddhist, that you wrote that your father's mother, that would have been your Jewish grandmother, was your first Buddhist teacher, that she used to tell you, where is it written that you're supposed to be happy all the time?
Yeah. In fact, you have to know that I grew up in a post-Depression household. Both my parents had jobs. And so I'm an only child. I lived with my two parents and my grandmother, who was widowed, my father's mother. And my parents went off to work, so my grandmother did a great deal of the mothering. And she was very, very solicitous, so that I remember her as bathing and washing and dressing me and making braids and preparing the kinds of foods that I like. And she was very, very solicitous. The only thing that she was pretty not moved to respond to was the coming and going of childhood bouts of, I'm not happy. I'd say, but I'm not happy. And she'd say, and that my grandmother was not a learned woman in that sense, but it's an ethnic thing to use that Talmudic turn of phrase. And she'd say, where is it written that you're supposed to be happy all the time? And I actually think it was the beginning of my spiritual practice, that life is difficult. And then 40 years later, I learned that the Buddha said the same thing, that life is inevitably challenging, and how are we going to do it in a way that's wise and doesn't complicate it more than it is just by itself?
So I want to talk tonight about that wisdom that you've learned and how it might apply to our lives as parents, not just the spiritual lives of our children, but how we nourish ourselves, right, as we are present to them, and as we impart what we want to impart to them. I have to say, Sylvia, that you're sitting here and you are so calm and you radiate wisdom, and your books radiate wisdom. But so it was somewhat comforting for me for you to also describe yourself as a lifelong warrior, and just talk about how being fretful comes naturally. And because you talked about that from your own childhood, that your mother was ill, and so that you learned to always. And that you had reasons to be scared and worried. Well,
I had reasons to be. I had reasons to be anxious as a child. My mother did have what they called in those days a weak heart. She'd had rheumatic rheumatic fever as a child, and she had, as a consequence, she lived with a chronic coronary insufficiency. And I worried about that. And she actually died when I was in my very early 20s. So I've passed more than 50 years now without a mother. And I wish I'd had one longer. But when I was a child, I worried about it a lot. But you know what I found, Krista? That there are people who are given to fretting without a fretful environment. I think it's actually, it's a genetic glitch of neurology, and that it happens for some people and not for other people. Actually, the Buddha said we have one of 5 genetic fallback glitches when we're challenged. He said some people fret, some people get angry, some people lose heart and all their energy goes and they don't know what to do with themselves. Some people think, uh-oh, it's me, I didn't do things right, it's always my fault, I messed things up. And some people need to be sensually soothed. They think, where's a donut shop? Where's a pizza? That people had different tendencies. It was very, very helpful for me as an adult to learn that, because it completely comes without a judgment. I don't have to say, I am a chronic fretter. I could say, when I'm challenged, fretting arises in my mind. It's just like it's like the weather got cloudy, or something happened. I didn't personally do it, and it's not a moral flaw. Mm-hmm. And it's very good for people who have a short fuse to be able to think, I have this unusual
that naturally arises
neurological
in me
glitch.
To know that.
This is what happens when I'm challenged. But to take it as I tell it to people that this is my glitch is when in doubt, worry. I said it came with the equipment. I'm also short and I have brown eyes, and if I could see that in the same neutral, it just came with the equipment. Then I don't have to feel bad about it, but I can work with it wisely. That's really the important part. When we see as adults what it is that our fallback glitch is, you can say, uh-oh. And I think in a certain way, that's a sign of wisdom. when a person begins to be able to delineate, this is what happens to me under tension.
It's that piece of self-knowledge.
It's a piece of self-knowledge that makes a break in between a certain next step and that next step, and say, oh. So that when I'm in an airport, for instance, and they say, attention, ladies and gentlemen, in the next half a second, my mind will always think somebody crashed. That's just now, when I tell them, not everybody thinks that, but many people do. I tested it out. I asked people, but in that mini segment, attention, ladies and gentlemen, and then I think, uh-oh, and then they say, please stay close to your luggage, da-da-da-da, and they always say the same thing too. So it's not like but. So I don't get too startled when I have that thought. It's just the thought. Or if I come to a place where I've agreed to meet my husband on a corner of a certain street, well, I'll meet you at 4th and B Street at 5 o'clock, and I come there at 5 and he's not there, and it's 5 past 5 and he's not there. I could start to think maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that.
Right.
But I think to myself, wait a minute. That is just my peculiar neurological glitch kicking in. Probably not.
Yeah.
I could just wait here quietly. I could look in the windows. I could look at the people. I could say relaxing phrases to my own mind. I could wish well to the passers-by. There are just lots of other things I can do rather than become all...
I think that becoming a parent actually heightens all of those possibilities for us.
I think so.
So I happened to have the experience of having my first child, my daughter, while I was at seminary, while I was studying theology, which was a really interesting thing to do, to be reflecting theologically and then going through this experience of bringing life into the world. But one of the really strong reactions I had after she was born was realizing that I'd grown up using this language of God as Father, and that it's not we don't reflect on what we mean, because this Father God, who I always thought of, was so sovereign, so powerful, right? And the experience of becoming a parent is one of excruciating vulnerability and loss of control.
And to be able to know
and
that...
this whole thing of worrying and catastrophizing and being fearful gives you all kinds of rich new reasons to do all of this.
Actually, no, it's really a fact. One of the people who... a woman who was came regularly. I teach at Spirit Rock Meditation Center out in California, and the class is kind of a regular group of people that comes every Wednesday. And a woman came who was pregnant with her first child, and the whole group was looking forward to her having her baby. And she took some time off after the baby was born, and then she came back, brought the baby with her, and she talked about, she said, when I became pregnant, everybody said, congratulations, great, 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 great. And when I had the baby, everybody said, congratulations, great, 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 great. Nobody told me that I had at that point mortgaged my heart for the entire rest of my life, because my happiness now depends on this baby being well and healthy and nothing bad happening to it. Nobody tells you that. They don't say when they hear. They don't say, uh-oh, brace yourself. They say congratulations. Because, Krista, it's both. It is congratulations. It's the most amazing thing we can do, as you said, theologically speaking, to create a new life that comes out with fingernails and eyelashes and all its fingers and toes. It's an amazing thing. And it's extremely awakening in the sense of knowing how vulnerable we are. Sometimes when you say goodbye to somebody, say, I'll see you soon, and you really actually never know. And it would be grim to think about that all the time. And but if I think about that enough of the time, I think the result of my thinking about that a lot is that I try very hard not to harbor any grudges and not to leave anybody in a not good way, and to say I love you as much as I can when I leave people and when I talk to my children or my grandchildren. I think that's actually the sequelae. You think about...
You mean the effect of being aware of how fragile...
In fact...
How fragile and strange and unpredictable life is.
In fact, that the crux of what the Buddha taught is realizing that everything passes, including these lives, and it's not a gloomy or macabre kind of philosophy. It's really an understanding about that's what's true, and knowing that's what's true. I think we're mandated not to waste any time with enmity or negativity or grudges. It's so easy to make a grudge list and then nurture it.
So, one way I think about, so one of the things I want to say about you, you've taught you've taught mindfulness meditation to rabbis. And I remember being at Barre, Massachusetts, at the Insight Meditation Society, where they also have mindfulness meditation for priests and nuns and Christian clergy. I think of a lot of this wisdom of Buddhism as, especially mindfulness, this idea of being awake and aware. It's really spiritual technologies that Buddhism has cultivated for thousands of years, and it's kind of offering itself up to the 21st century with a new relevance. And yes, I want to ask you again, in this context of raising children, let's talk about this core insight that suffering, and again, we're acknowledging that parenting is the greatest loss of control we ever suffer, right? That suffering results from struggling with what is beyond my control. That idea of that our minds get in conflict with our experience, and that's where suffering comes from, not so much from the realities themselves, but how we struggle with them. How do you think that applies to this?
Well, I just remembered, actually, just before we came out here this evening, as I was sitting backstage, I remembered I was on a flight last Friday, and there was a family of 5 traveling with me. Behind me was a father and 1 child, and in these 3 seats alongside of me was the mother and 2 other children. And my estimate of those children's ages were 7 and 5 and probably 2.5. More than 2, but maybe not quite 3. And everything is progressing well. It wasn't a terribly long flight. Near the end of the flight, practically as we were beginning our descent, the 2 or 3-year-old, the small girl alongside her mother and next to her brother, fell asleep. So here she is all slumped over, and then we're landing. And then as we come down to land, she wakes up with that bump, and she's disconcerted, and I figure probably her ears hurt. Yeah. She just fell asleep, and now she's awakened, and it's late in the afternoon. It's probably her nap time is way off. And she not only woke up, but she woke up and she's beside herself and crying and flailing in the way of 3-year-olds. And I watched these 2 parents, and they were fabulous. First, the mother picks her up and holds her, talks to her quietly, but nevertheless, the child was beside herself, just with all these efforts. She was, clearly disconcerted. If I woke up and I was 2.5, there's a rumbling plane, and it's rumbling along the runway, and all the people are standing up, and it's an overwhelming kind of a thing. So she's just beside herself, and her mother was completely just consoling and quietly talking to her, not losing her equanimity at all. And I was marveling at it. I thought it was wonderful. Sometimes you see much more upset parents. So this parent was not upset. And then by and by, after a little while, the dad over here said, "Pass her to me." So they changed children, and she passed this one back to him. And then he, behind me, spoke to her in such a kindly way. And slowly, she pulled herself together. And I just so admired their parenting skill. I admired it because, first of all, the child calmed herself down. They didn't whiz themselves up and create more suffering for themselves. They also didn't create more suffering for the whole plane, because, sometimes when a child is getting upset and the parent becomes all upset,
right,
then you feel pulled into it.
Right.
But somehow these parents' equanimity was like a calming effect around the whole plane. And I was thinking, I was just thinking about it. It came into my mind just before we came in. And I thought, they were really, at the time, I thought they were really good parents. But I thought the element of their goodness was that they were actually very wise, and that the wisdom involved is this child is 2.5. And that's what 2.5-year-olds do when they're awakened from a nap in the middle of a loud and rumbling landing.
You know, that's also an illustration of a distinction you made when you talk about something about wise effort. I found this really helpful, and I feel like that's a story about it. You said, in terms of our reactions, the difference, that there's a big difference in any moment between asking, am I pleased? Which, of course, on an airplane and you have a screaming child, you're not pleased, you're embarrassed. You think you will be less disruptive if you can make them quiet as quick. But the difference between asking, am I pleased, or in this moment, am I able to care?
Yeah. For the child and for myself, in a kindly way. They really devoted themselves to the child, but also they kept themselves well by not becoming distraught. They kept the whole back of the plane well, I think, by not becoming distraught, because I think that those kinds of feelings radiate out. I thought, these are really good parents. They just, they took care of what they could. They did what they could as long as they needed to, and it worked. But they didn't push it any faster than they needed to. I thought to myself, I wonder, well, if it would be, I thought to myself, I wonder if they're followers of any particular religious tradition. I thought to myself, could be any tradition, because everybody's religion is about kindness and goodness and taking care of what needs to be taken care of and recognizing what you can't do anything about, and which is hard. But you can't do anything about a 2.5-year-old who's lost it, except wait for them to pull it together.
Here's something else you've said that's provocative and just so true. It's not fair. The 3 words, it's not fair, have caused more trouble than any words throughout history. But what's interesting about that is it's not fair is also the beginning of our children's ethical instinct.
In fact.
But then to varying degrees, we live with that instinct throughout our lives.
No, I think that's a really important point, Krista, that I think probably people will be able to relate to that, when you grow up in a family and in the normal course of parenting, even before the child ventures out in the world and goes to school, there are incidents where they need to share with someone, or whatever it is, they have to wait in line. And we say, we do this because it's fair, and we do this because it's fair. And we carry on about it's fair because it's fair. And then they go to school, and they come home, and they say the teacher has favorites. They favor so-and-so and so-and-so over me. And you say, I'm terribly sorry, I can't do anything about that. And they say, but it's not fair.
Right.
And here you are, the people who have said it's about fairness. And sometimes you have to say, it's not fair, and we can't do anything about it. But in the largest sense, when we as adults occupy ourselves with what's not fair in the world, and we take our children with us, and they hear and see and take part in the expressions of our own generosity, our own kindness, our own social activism. When I think about parenting, I think you said it before about parenting as a spiritual practice. I think as social activism as a spiritual practice. I think of voting as a spiritual practice.
So how do we help them walk that line between... I remember Sister Helen Prejean, who is a great opponent of the death penalty, who said anger is a moral response, right? But then it's what do you do with that anger? This is what you're saying also, that it's not fair is a fundament of morality and of activism.
Yeah.
So how do we walk that line between demonstrating that and also helping ourselves and our children live wisely with those feelings and those observations of life's unfairness?
I think a lot about that. I remember my father, who's now long gone, hearing me teach about transforming anger into work in the world, doing something. And he'd say, I need my anger, Sylvia. It motivates me to do all the activism that I do. And I said, well, you do need it, Dad. You need it just to alert you to what needs attention. but you don't need it. You don't need to carry it along with you to keep refueling you. And as a matter of fact, if you keep nurturing the flame of anger, it confuses the mind, and maybe we don't respond as wisely as we ought to. That I need the anger, as if I had 104 fever, it would be a sign that I need to do something about it.
But then you let the anger...
But then you let it... Well, I hope that what I do is I recognize the anger as a response, actually, it's a response, I think, to what I feel underneath it, which is a fear. Things really aren't fair. This is not right, that this and this is happening in the world. And I think in response to that fear, which is basic, the human response is to lash out at it when something frightens us. Do you know what's the easiest example of that? If you come by a door and as a joke, someone's hiding behind the door and they leap out and they say boo, and you get mad at them for doing it.
Right.
Or you see sometimes, this is a terrible thing to see, you see sometimes a child rushes out into traffic and a parent runs out and grabs it and then hits it. What they've done is they've gotten frightened, and then they get angry. So I think that the anger is on top of the fear, and to be able to say, I am frightened because in the world these unjust things are happening. What can I do? And how can I have a mind that's energized to do something about it, but not reacting in anger, but responding in firm kindness? But things need to be different. Things need to be different.
I think you've said something like that your measuring stick for how clearly you're thinking is how, if you're able to be kind.
Oh, I think that, I have been talking a lot about kindness in the last few years. It's such in a sense, a humble word when we think about spiritual practices, or if I think about 30 or more years ago when I began to be interested in a meditative path. We talked about things like enlightenment and revelation, and kindness is much more humble. But I actually think kindness is what I'd really like to establish in myself. The Dalai Lama, when people ask him, what's your religion, says, my religion is kindness. And I think it's a word that subsumes tolerance and forgiveness and graciousness and patience. All of those things are kind things. Those folks on the plane were being kind to their child, kind to each other, kind to the whole plane by their ability to keep it together.
What I like about kindness is that it's doable.
Yeah.
And unlike those virtues, like compassion, or even tolerance that you have to cultivate, it can be a lifetime cultivating those things. You can actually be kind to someone even if you don't feel especially compassionate.
Yeah.
Or it can be an act.
It's an act, and I think it's on the way to actually genuinely being compassionate. The way I keep thinking about it, Krista, is when I'm kind in any circumstance, whatever, someone cuts in front of me in the you're going with a basket in the supermarket, and someone zips in right in front of you, and you only have 2 items in your basket anyway, so they could have not. But so your mind thinks a thought. But when my mind thinks a thought like that, or they shouldn't have done that, in that moment, I'm complicating my own mind with my own negativity, which I'd rather not do. But if I could catch myself do that and instead think to myself, who knows, maybe he's late for some place, maybe he really needs to be, maybe this is urgent, may he be well, may he get there in a good shape, may he live happily, then I don't really mess up my own mind. And I arrive, so I'm 2 minutes later in the supermarket checkout. So I've done myself a kindness. And the wisdom, I think, that comes from not upsetting the mind is you never know. I really don't know where that person is going. And you never know whether it's good to go out now or 2 minutes later. Maybe, who knows what traffic he'll get into or I. Just to not fight with the moment. There they are. Why complicate it? I think we're in the habit of doing that a lot.
And I suppose we modeled that for our children then, they become like that too. Do you have thoughts about passing this kind of idea, this kind of teaching on to children? And even as I say that, I realize that probably the best way is to be like that. I remember my daughter, who's 17 now, she said to me the other day, so is this one of those do what I say, not what I do things? Right? But do you, so I assume you model this, but do you talk to your children or your grandchildren about kindness, about this kind of...
I think it probably comes up in the conversation from time to time. I don't bring it up as a sermon, but I suppose it comes up when they're talking. My grandchildren might be talking about something that's going on in school, and I think by what we respond to and what we nurture, that's really what grows in our children. That one of my friends has a story that he likes to tell, which I've heard now as a Native American story. I've heard it as every kind of a story, but as a wise grandfather saying to his grandson, or it could be a wise grandmother saying to her granddaughter, I have two wolves in my heart. One is loving and one is vicious, and they're at war with each other, and the grandchild saying, which is going to win? And the grandparent saying, the one I feed. So I think that, it works in any kind of I think that we're always, I think our children learn to speak in a tone that we speak in, or to hold people kindly if we do.
I want to let you know that if you have questions you'd like to write down, finish those up, and somebody will be walking through in a few minutes to collect the cards. We're also going to have a radio moment here.
You know what? We don't have to have a radio moment, because I want to tell you one more thing that
All right.
I had in my mind. I wanted to tell this out. I've never said it in a public audience, but I just thought about it recently. I decided that I'll find out soon if this is a good analogy, but I was thinking about the GPS in my car. It never gets annoyed at me. If I make a mistake, it says, recalculating. And then it tells me, make the soonest left turn and go back. I thought to myself, I should write a book and call it Recalculating, because I think that that's what we're doing all the time. That something happens, it challenges us, and the challenge is, okay, Sylvia, you want to get mad now? You could get mad. You could go home. You could make some phone calls. You could tell a few people you can't believe what this person said or that person said. You could go. Indignation is tremendously seductive, and to share, with other people on the telephone and all that. So to not do it, and to say, wait a minute, apropos of you said before, wise effort, to say to yourself, wait a minute, this is not the right road. Literally, this is not the right road. There's a fork in the road here. I could become indignant. I could flame up this flame of negativity. Or I could say, recalculating. I'll just go back here.
Well, this is an example of technology instilling us with spiritual disciplines.
No, I think
we find so much to criticize.
And no matter how many times I don't make that turn, it will continue to say, recalculating. The tone of voice will stay the same.
That's good. I think it's a good analogy.
Well, about the technology, a lot of people have said, as you said when we began, life is so much different now and so much speeded up. And I noticed that people, I was watching the news in the airport, and not only I was watching the news of the demonstration in Cairo, and but which was so exciting. But underneath that, in the rolling tape that's underneath it, was every 15 seconds another piece of information on top of all this information. So there's so much stuff to process, and it's so stimulating. And it's very seductive to say, life has become so whizzed up and so busy. how can, people possibly pay attention long enough to fix the world, which really needs on many levels to get fixed. And I've been saying for a long time, and I think that because of this technology, because I remember a journalist saying that the reason the Berlin Wall came down, the proximal cause of the fall of the wall was the fax machine.
Fax machines. I read that recently, too.
And I've been thinking since then that the proximal cause of the world stopping and saying, we have to do things a different way is going to be people all over the world saying, just a second, we're destroying the biosphere and everything else. We'll stop and look and say everybody. I usually carry a poem by Pablo Neruda.
I'm going to have you read that at the end.
You brought it.
I brought it.
Ah, good.
I brought it. That's it. Yeah.
I brought it to Detroit, but it's in my hotel room. I carry it with me always.
We're going to read that. We're going to give that as a gift to everyone because you gave it as a gift to me. Here's our radio moment. I'm Krista Tippett on Being, conversation about meaning, religion, ethics, and ideas. Today in a public conversation on raising children in complex times. I'm with Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist, mother and grandmother Sylvia Boorstein. Her books include Happiness is an Inside Job, Practicing for a Joyful Life. Sylvia, I want to ask you to this question of raising children, human beings who are kind, who have a heart for the world, in a world that's troubled. When you and I met on a panel in Southern California 2 years ago, you told a story about leading mindfulness teaching sessions. And you told a story about, I think it was a man who at the end of it said, I'm frightened to go back out into the world. I feel so vulnerable, and in here I'm safe. But I don't know how I can be out in the world and be vulnerable. And that story came back to me as I was thinking about interviewing you on this subject, because I think as a parent, there's a version of that goes through my mind. How much do I expose my children to? How do I teach them to be kind and open to the world's pain and vulnerable, and yet I want them to be safe. And I actually want them to be tough out in that scary world at the same time. Talk to me about that.
Well, I remember, it's a two-part answer. I remember that, I don't remember exactly that moment, but I'm sure it happened because it comes up often. And people will come and spend a week at a retreat center or a weekend or however many days, and then they do say, here everyone is safe and it's quiet, and to go out, I feel too vulnerable. And it gives me a chance to say, really, I don't think we can become too vulnerable. I'm waiting for the time that the whole world is suddenly too vulnerable and looks around and says, wait a minute, we're making a very big mistake. We all have to stop. We have to share. We have to make sure there's enough to eat all over the world. We have to stop. We can teach each other our ways and tell each other our hopes and dreams, but we can't kill each other. That doesn't work. And we can't kill the earth, and we can't despoil it as we're doing. So in a sense, that's a half of an answer, Krista, because that's what I'd say to an adult who's leaving a retreat.
Right.
To a parent, I say, as a child is growing up, inevitably, they live in the world and they'll hear about things. If they live in a house that's relatively peaceful, and we have a certain amount of control as parents about how much the TV is on and what's on the TV, and how much they are confronted by the pain of the world. And you know what I think? Since for myself, really, I can't. There's sometimes with the pain of the world seems incomprehensible and unbearable to me. But I think if there's anything that balances it, it's the wonder at the world, the amazingness of people, how kind they are, how resilient they are, how people will take care of people that they don't know. If somebody falls or someone's in trouble or in a public place, people take care of them. People take care of people that they don't know. That human beings have that ability. I don't think they have to learn it. They don't have to have lessons I think we're a companionable species. And for the most part, every once in a while we meet hermit-type people, but for the most part we're companionable and congenial, and we care about other people, and we take care of them. So to be able to look at human beings and say human beings are amazing, life is amazing. The sun came up in the exact right place this morning and celebrates seasons. I think that's a wonderful part of being part of a group of people who celebrate seasons and birthdays and holy days, so that here we are again at another time in another season. And there's that great cosmos out there to look at and imagine people up, going up into space and looking at the stars, and our ancestors looked at the same stars. I think that there's a way of, if I keep in myself a sense of amazement, I tell my grandchildren, look at this moon. It's a 3-day moon. It's the best moon. It's better than a 2-day moon. A 2-day moon is kind of skimpy. You really can't see it yet. And a 4-day moon, it's already like on its way to a moon. But a 3-day moon is just beautiful. It's my favorite moon. And if I show that to them, then they begin to think, it's my favorite moon, a 3-day moon. But, that just happens to be me. I like moons. Everybody will do it in their own way. But, I think that always balances it. When the Buddha taught about needing to see the suffering in the world so that we could respond with compassion, he also talked about the preciousness of life and the need to take care of it. And I think they're
cultivating those two at the same time. I mean, that's also something I think our children give us new eyes, especially when they're very little, to see the world. Actually, Trent, my colleague, was talking about taking a walk with his son the other day. And I remember those moments when your children are little and it's like everything has been invented for them,
That's
right?
it.
And they name it.
Yeah.
And everything is fascinating.
Right. You can look at one flower for a long time because it's amazing when you start to do that. I have a friend who ends all of her emails, where you have an automatic signature and you push your automatic signature. Her automatic signature says, "Stay amazed." And I love that.
Also, this is also making me think about how we need to be attentive to what our children can teach us as well as what we want to impart to them, because some of this they know, and they actually know more immediately than we do because we lose it. I remember watching something terrible on the news the other day, and my daughter said, so many beautiful lives in the world, and this is what they focus on. I thought, she's so right. But she knows that, and I've kind of lost it.
Well, I think the beautiful and wonderful lives in the world, I certainly am not a sociologist of journalism, aren't as compelling images
Right.
as the others.
They don't make good headlines.
They don't make good headlines.
Yeah.
It'd be wonderful. I don't know if it would be commercially viable if there were a channel that had all the wonderful things.
I don't know. It's hard to make goodness sexy. It is. I think about this a lot as a journalist.
But somebody could do that. Some entrepreneur could figure it out.
Maybe. But I think it's like kindness. It's the stuff of moments. But it can be absolutely transformative in moments. And these beautiful lives are transformative in moments. And maybe they don't lend themselves, and that's just fine. But we have to train ourselves to look for them, right? That's what mindfulness is about in part.
Both there were two things that you just said. One of them is that when we are really paying attention, which is what mindfulness is, we really connect with other people. Lots of times I think, for reasons of rush or whatever, even with our own children, we're not completely there. I have a friend whose grandchild said to him, his grandchild, with whom he spends a lot of time, said to him, he was visiting and staying at the house and doing whatever. He said, "Grandpa, do you love me?" I said, "Of course I love you. Don't you? You do know that, don't you?" He said, yes, but I don't feel it when you aren't paying attention to me. So there is something about really paying attention.
Sylvia, we're going to go to questions in a minute, but I wondered if you'd just do a quick and dirty loving kindness. If you'd take us through just the idea of the metta practice, of a loving kindness meditation. Give everybody just a taste.
Oh, we'll do it.
Of what happens.
We'll do it.
Because this is something that's really central to you and to your teaching. And
it is.
I think it's central to what we're talking about, cultivating in ourselves and imparting.
It is. I'm thrilled that I get to tell it to everybody.
Okay.
So I have to give you a 1-minute explanation of what this is. The Buddha taught mindfulness meditation, which is a practice of paying attention moment to moment in a balanced way. He also gave instructions to, at all times, cultivate a loving heart. There's a particular sermon called the Sermon on Impartial Love. Sometimes it's called the Buddha's teaching on kindness. And it says that towards everyone we should wish, may all beings be at ease. In some translations it says, may all beings be happy. But may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be. And then it goes through all the categories of living beings, far and near, and those you know and those you don't know. And I've done it as a practice now for 25 years, and I teach it mostly because I like it very much. And over the years, I've come to appreciate that it sounds very much like a prayer for other people. May these people be well, and these, and these, and these. And it is indeed. But I actually think it's most crucially a prayer for my own well-being, because there's no time that I feel safer or happier than when I'm in touch with my own kindness or benevolence. And it's a blessing practice, essentially. And in the mode of blessing, there can't be any negativity. Negativity cannot exist in a blessing mind. It would be like driving your car in forward and reverse at the same time. It can't happen. So it's actually the antidote to any negativity. And so we could do a very short as I say, Reader's Digest version of a metta practice, but it'll be fine. It will work anyway. And if you'd like, you could close your eyes. It's perfectly all right to have your eyes open if you'd rather not. But since I'm going to ask you to imagine somebody who might not be here, you might have an easier time imagining with your eyes closed. So you don't have to sit in a special way, but if you want to, close your eyes. And just take 2 deep breaths in and out, in and out, in and out. Take a long breath in and out, and in again and out. And feel yourself sitting here. Feel yourself sitting here. Feel yourself surrounded by all these people. Feel yourself, I hope, happy and content. And think in your mind, a blessing for yourself. The metta practice, loving kindness practice, always begins with a blessing for yourself. So think for yourself, may I feel safe. Think those words in your mind. May I feel content. May I feel strong. May I live with ease. Bring into your mind someone that you love tremendously. A parent, a partner, a child, a sibling, someone you love enormously, that thinking of them brings delight into your mind. You probably have more than one. Pick one just for this moment. Imagine them right in front of you. Imagine that they can feel you wishing for them. So you make this wish in your mind for your person. May you feel safe. May you feel content. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. Think about another person that you love a lot. Imagine them and wish for them. May you feel safe. May you feel content. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. Let your body stay relaxed and easy. I often tell people to smile when they're blessing. It makes their whole body more relaxed. Think of someone that you rarely think about, but that you'd recognize if you met. I always think about Paula, who's been cutting my hair for 10 years. I like her very much, but I normally don't think about her in between. So I love to think about her sometimes in the middle of blessing, because my relationship with her becomes a little dearer. Think of a person that's a familiar stranger and wish for them. May you feel safe. May you feel content. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. Think about past the people that you recognize in the world, familiar strangers, all the unfamiliar strangers, near and far, all around us here and stretching out all around the whole world, all around this whole globe. All people just like us, with lives, who want us just as we do, to live in safety and contentment, to be able to feel strong, to have lives of ease, who share with us the same wishes and hopes and dreams that we have as human beings, come home to their family, to be able to take care of their family, celebrate another birthday. Wish for all those people, all beings near and far. May you feel safe. May you feel content. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. May all of us everywhere feel safe and content and strong and live with ease. Before you open your eyes now, think of the person to your right, to your left, and back of you and in front of you, and see if, as you say these phrases of blessing in your mind, you can actually feel that you are radiating out these blessings of well-wishing to them. May you feel safe. May you feel content. May you feel strong. May you live with ease. And when you open your eyes now and look around, perhaps you look to the right and to the left and behind and in front and see all the people who've been blessing you. It's a lovely feeling to be in a room full of blessing people. I have one of my fantasies, which has become stronger since last week, and talking about people power and media power, is that the whole world will wish themselves something like that, and we'll have a different world.
Well, that's not our typical public radio moment. Michael Alcesser, you helped make this happen. So Sylvia, one thing, following on that, loving kindness meditation is also towards oneself, and you share a story in your writing about precisely that. But you share what you often say to yourself when you're in a moment of anxiety. Okay, so I think this is just great advice. I'm going to hang on to this. Sweetheart, you are in pain. Relax, take a breath. Let's pay attention to what is happening. Then we'll figure out what to do. I think that's a fabulous... Those are fabulous sentences for oneself and for one's children.
I'm so pleased that you found that. Do you know what? It's tremendously pleasing to me because I meet people in some significant number who tell me that they say to themselves in moments of distress, I say to myself, sweetheart, you're in pain. Relax, take a breath. I love that. A whole bunch of people out there saying to themselves, sweetheart.
So as I promised, I want to end with a poem. We're going to let Pablo Neruda have the last word. Because you mentioned this in your writing as a poem that you always have with you, and I printed it out, and I think it's beautiful, and I wonder if you'd leave that as a gift for all the rest of us.
This is called Keeping Quiet. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt the sadness of never understanding ourselves and of frightening ourselves with death. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go.
Thank you, Sylvia Boorstein, and thanks to all of you.